Perfect. So first of all, welcome to everyone who is watching today's panel discussion about raising multilingual children. Feel free also to write in the comments if you have any questions, if you agree on something that our panelists say, or if you disagree even, feel free to use the chat. Okay, let's start with a short presentation round for those who might not know you. Heather, would you like to start?
Okay, sure, I will start. My name is Heather. I am a mom to 2 little kids. So my kids are the youngest here. They are 2.5 and 4. And I was a French and Spanish teacher, now doing a doctorate at the University of Ottawa. And I host a podcast called The Future is Bilingual to interview parents and also people that grew up bilingual. Basically, I'm interviewing anyone who's multilingual to talk about how they learn their languages and just all the journey and the pitfalls and all that stuff we're going to talk about today. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. My husband's Polish, so our home language is Polish. So I'm raising my kids in a non-native language, a language I don't even speak that well. I speak French better than I speak Polish, so it's quite interesting. But yeah, we use English and French as well now that we're in Quebec. So, and we sing in Spanish and Italian even now. So we're quite multilingual in our house just because music and that kind of stuff.
Interesting. I'd like to be one of your children, but well, yeah. Okay, who would like
to? You wanted to be my child.
Yeah, that's true. That's
You're
true.
already adopted.
That's true. I changed my mind now because Heather's home sounds more fun.
What?
Okay. Yeah. Who would like to continue? Just go ahead.
Okay. Rita?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Excited to be here. So I am Rita Rosenbach, and I am from Multilingual Parenting. I'm founder of the website of the same name and a Facebook group. I've written a book, Bringing Up a Bilingual Child. So I'm a family language coach. I help parents to make the most of the languages they have in their family to ensure that they grow up speaking them. I'm also at the helm of the Peach project, which is a Europe and worldwide project now to support parents and educators raising bilingual children. And within that project, we have free guides and more. Thank you for inviting me.
So I guess it's my turn. Thank you for inviting me also from my side. So I'm Ute Limacher-Riebold, and I am the owner of Ute's International Lounge, where I support, among others, multilingual families like mine, actually. My background is in linguistics and philology, and we speak multiple languages in our home. So we speak, well, I have to count. German, Dutch, English, a bit of Swiss German, Italian, French, Spanish, and my son also learned Chinese and is now starting with Japanese. And I am, a little bit attempting to learn Korean at the moment, inspired by my son. So I have also collaborated with Rita at that project. And I'm also the author of the Toolbox for Multilingual Families, which is, a book where there are a lot of ideas for multilingual families to transmit and maintain their home languages and other languages that you add to the picture. I'm the mother of 3. I have a 19-year-old son, and my daughters, who are twins, are 15.
Fantastic. I forgot to mention about my family, which is so important to me. So I grew up with 2 languages, Finnish and Swedish, and then studied German at uni, plus French and a little bit of Spanish. I married someone from India, so we have children who learned Punjabi and Finnish and Swedish, and then we moved to England where they learned English, and now I'm helping to raise my 2 grandsons to speak Swedish here in the UK. I live in Scotland at the moment.
Cool, the grandparent, yes. There's such an important role. So yes, awesome.
She's got different hats of experience over many years. Fantastic. All right, let me do my little spiel. My name is Tetsu Yung, and in the language polyglot world, I also have different hats. I have the Langfest hat, and now I'm here to represent my own brand here, Ask Tetsu. So I have a YouTube channel where I talk about how I raise my 4 kids in 5 languages: English, French, Japanese, Mandarin, and Spanish. And I also have a big project with Rita and Ute. I don't know if that's how you see it on your screen, but I have Rita to my left and Ute to my bottom right. And we run a program called Raising Multilinguals Live, where we find experts in this field and do live interviews and have a live audience ask questions during the interview. So that's actually, we have a session tomorrow. So we do that every Tuesday at 1 p.m. my time in Montreal, and that's 6 p.m. in London. All right.
I don't know if Tetsu added a few more episodes, because we only do every second Tuesday, not every Tuesday.
You didn't know I was running the sessions in between. So there you go. I consider myself a polyglot, a mini polyglot compared to everybody here at this conference. But I think I have a specialty in raising kids in multiple languages. So that's where I do a lot of my stuff online through my channel. Okay.
Wow. Oh my God. We've got an expert round here. This is, wow. I'm very much looking forward to your answers. I have so many questions. Okay, so the first one, and I know that this is also from people who have no experience with raising multilingual children. This is a very common question. So as a toddler, how many languages can a toddler actually handle? Like, what is also your experience? What have you done? Or maybe also what have you tried and what would you recommend? I would like to start with Rita, because she has different experiences as a mother, but also as a grandmother. So what is your experience, Rita? How many languages can a toddler handle?
So the most that I've had a toddler learn is 4 at the same time, and that was in our personal experience. That's fine. That is, it's a very loaded question. That how many is possible, because it depends on so many. If you were to kind of, let's say, if a parent would come to any of us here, I think, and ask that question, we would come back with about 15 different questions, which we would like to know first about the situation before we would add it. I mean, the only thing we can say that to learn a language, a child needs to have a certain amount of exposure and the opportunity to use the language. So that's where the limitation come in. But also, it doesn't mean that, okay, would you think that right 5 is the limit, but then they can be simultaneous. They're not all kind of or sequential instead of simultaneous. So sorry, I'm not answering your question because I'm not going to give you a number.
Well, I think this is often the case for language learning advice, right? That you can't, it's not just black and white. The world is never just black and white. So I like your answer because it says also like the different factors, the language exposure, for example. So we've heard now, I think, Ute, the languages that you have with your family, how many were those? I wasn't even able to count them.
Several.
At least
yes,
6 or 7.
Yes, 6 or 7. At the moment, I mean, my children are teenagers, and they added several languages at school and in other settings. Yeah, I did not transmit Chinese because I don't speak it. So that's from other channels. But what they started with were 3 languages in our family plus 2 in the community. And they were toddlers, and they were able to understand what the people were saying at the level of what was necessary for them, of course. Yeah, we're not talking about adult speech; it's child speech directed. So I think my answer to this question would first of all be, how do you define handle the languages? Is it understanding them, being able to respond with actions? Or do you think, are you expecting them already to have like conversations maybe with monosyllables, or however, how old the child is? So in my experience, yes, it's the same like with Rita. The maximum were like 4 languages. If there were people in their almost daily life who would speak with them and prompt them also to respond in whatever way, yeah? So because handling a language can also be to respond with a gesture, for example, right? Because then you have the communication is functioning, it's working. So that would be my answer. But where's the need and where is people who provides the input and also, yes, prompts the response.
Very interesting. You've mentioned something that I was actually wondering, because you said, how do you define to handle a language? It's the same question as when we get asked, how do you define being fluent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, how do you actually measure the language level of a child? Or do you do that, or like not at all? Like, how can you say like, yeah, he's doing fine with that language, or he's not okay with that language? Heather, what's your experience with that? Do you measure language level?
Mine are little, but definitely. So my native language is English, and my family was monitoring more my kids' English, like, because we were speaking Polish at home. So my mom was like, I don't understand that my daughter, because of the pandemic, had only heard Polish pretty much because we couldn't see anyone. And so my mom was like, I don't understand her. So we were measuring a little bit like, well, I think she understands your English, but she speaks back in Polish. But like, I don't really consciously measure their languages. I'm just kind of monitoring how it's progressing. But it's amazing how quickly she picked it up. Once my mom was able to visit outside, she picked it up so quickly, and they're picking up French so quickly. So it's just, it's not the same as like, I feel like adults when we're like, oh, I want to get to a B2, and we have all these concrete ideas of what we want to do with the language. It's more just monitoring, and we have such different expectations of kids, like Ute was referring to. Just, can they respond? Like, I'm watching my kid go to daycare today, and the teachers are speaking French to him, which we've only been here less than 2 months, so he's still kind of grasping what they're saying. But like, you know, they're showing him like what to do, and it's a routine every day, so he's picking it up, and they're coming home and telling us, my teacher says this, and then they like say the one word that they're it's just, yeah, I don't think about it though as a level, because it's not the same as when adults, like, we want to be able to have a conversation about politics, or, you know, whatever the European scales are measuring there.
Okay, interesting. Anyone here from our panelists, do you measure the language learning level of your kids differently, or do you all agree with Heather?
I agree with Heather.
Yeah,
I
sure.
think we, at least how I see parents that I come in contact with, I mean, you're putting all your energy into making sure that they can learn the languages, and then you follow the progress. And that is important, to follow the progress, but measuring, no.
So I don't want pressure. I don't want to have them to feel like they have to get to a certain point. So it's more just letting it naturally develop and evolve, and just celebrating like, oh, you understood that? Or like, they tell me like, I said this word today, and I'm like, oh, that's so awesome, you spoke French to your teacher. And just celebrating little tiny wins, because it is a huge deal for them. You know, we've moved them to a different country where they speak a different language, and they're barely grasping the idea that people speak different languages. So at least in my case, I'm still in that toddler world. And Tetsu as well has little ones, so he can speak.
Yeah, Tetsu has all kind of age, I'd say.
Yeah, that's true.
But do your kids even realize that they speak different language, or do they compare themselves to other kids at school? Tetsu, like, you've got it all. You've got all kind of, you've got from the 1-year-old to 8?
9. My oldest is 9. Yeah.
9. Oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
I think by 7, 8 years old, they've got, you know, enough really start comparing and contrasting their skills and whatnot. Before that, I mean, obviously by 3 or 4, they know that they're speaking a different language. They're able to really separate the languages in minds. But to have this conscious effort of comparing him or herself to others, I think 7, 8 years old is sort of where they start to do that actively. Our kids, we don't really measure actively per se in terms of, a score or a standard. I just look at them whether they are able to integrate into the social circles within that language. So we go to Japan, for example, every year we go to Japan and Taiwan. We put them into the local schools, and I always ask the teachers, I mean, I don't, no need to really stress out about the grades and whatnot. Well, I want to know if they are making friends, if they are, integrating into the social circles and not being excluded. Those are the things that I always ask the teachers to let me know. Hopefully they're not bullied or even worse, they're actually bullying others, that kind of stuff. I want
What
them
level
to
is that
really...
when you can bully someone in a language? It's like definitely a B2, C1.
Yeah, I guess so. But it could sort of be the expression of the opposite, where, they feel a stress of not being able to express themselves verbally, and then they sort of express themselves physically.
Yeah. I meant
that's also a
verbally
possibility.
being able to bully.
But definitely, yeah. I always think you master a language if you are able to have an argument, or if you are able to understand the humor in that language. So that's sort of a barometer that I put out myself as an adult learner.
Taking a phone call in a language is also a good
yes.
measure. Yeah, because you don't have any of the cues except the heard language.
Yeah.
And it could be difficult to hear.
Yeah,
well.
Maybe I can add something about when someone can consciously recognize or be aware that they're speaking another language. I remember I was 4 when I realized that our neighbor's son, who was speaking always Italian, of course we were in Italy, and he would never reply in German, and I was really upset, and I was saying, why are you not replying in German for once? And I went to my mom and I asked why this was, and then she explained to me that we were guests in this country. Well, we lived there for quite a long time, but still. And I remember also my son, he was also around 4 or 5-ish when he told us, why do I have to speak that language and my friends speak the other one, and the other children in the playground speak another language? So I think, and there is also this unconscious mind, right, in language development, where children around up to 4, 5, 6 just absorb everything, and then comes the conscious mind of the little child around age 6, when they start going to school and when they start having more social life, maybe, that they can realize that they are speaking other languages actually. Yeah, and coming back maybe to the measurement, I also don't like measuring, but I think it's not realistic to say we never measure, because unconsciously we do, and we are also required by the system, right? When the children go to school, or when they're assessed at school, or even when they have the 2 years assessment, right? If the speech is developing like expected. So I would rather say, well, it's a stage where children are in. I try to figure out which stage are they in. Are they understanding? Are they able to speak already? And it's somewhere in the back of the mind, it's this conscious thing. Our children need to be able to function in the context where they are growing up in. So, but I would not, really measure in the terms that also Heather mentioned. No, yeah.
But I think as parents, we also always want to support our kids. So I feel like we are on that subconscious level, like, well, how are they doing? Do they need my support? Do I need to help them? And it depends on your level in the language. Like if you move to a country that you don't speak the language, that could be a whole nother challenge on the whole family, because you might not be able to support them. If I had to move to Germany right now, I would be at a loss. So.
Absolutely. But also if there is something that needs to be detected, you have always an eye on your child, or you know what could happen. So you're maybe
I think that's just instinct. You're always kind of watching and keeping track, and all the parents nodding.
Thank you for being so transparent about that. I think a lot of people can relate to this, like you maybe don't want to measure, but maybe unconsciously you do, or maybe you do even consciously. So we also have a couple of comments here already, people who have grown up in a bilingual environment, others who are raising trilingual kids in Japan. Very interesting. I just wanted to ask, because one of you mentioned this part about when the kids realize that the other kids don't speak the language. I think it was Ute telling about her experience in Italy. So now I'd like to shift a little bit to this part. How can you help your kids, or even, let's say, even if you're an au pair and you work in a multilingual family, how can you help and support the kids? So first question would be into that direction. When the kids start realizing that they speak a different language, or even several different languages compared to their classmates or in kindergarten, can that create frustration? Have you experienced any kind of frustration with your kids? Yeah, Heather?
Yeah, for sure. Well, just my kids saying like they didn't understand what the daycare lady was saying, and coming home and saying, oh, this kid, hurt me. And like, I know that they're not understanding everything. So it's a little bit tricky for sure.
So how do you handle that situation then?
Well, luckily I can talk with the daycare people and see what's happening. So I usually, pick them up, talk, see what's going on. And also we're lucky that his daycare has some kids that speak English. So I've noticed his English has actually gotten better. He's playing more in English when he comes home, because at daycare, he's hanging out with the Anglophone kids, or the kids that are at least bilingual and speak English, versus the only French speakers, or the French only speakers. So we're in a fortunate situation, because English is their second language. They speak pretty well, and we're in such a bilingual community that they have that support. I think it would have been a lot harder if it was just Polish, French. So haven't had too many struggles, and it's only been like a month of daycare. So.
Okay. The other panelists, what is your experience with this kind of frustration when your children discover this? Oh, I speak another language, and the others don't understand me, or I don't understand them.
Yeah, I had. So when we moved from Finland, where we lived to start with, to the UK, my youngest daughter was 6, and she didn't speak a word of English. And according to English standards, she would go to year 2 at school. And she was worried in advance and say, "Mom, what should I do if I don't understand what the teacher tells me?" It was a hard question to answer when we were still in Finland, and she was worried about that. And I knew she would have to basically go straight into school when we came to the UK. I just answered, "I will be there with you if you need me." I didn't know if that was possible or not, but I just promised her, and I would make that happen if it needed to be. But and then she was a little bit nervous the first day, but the teachers must have been absolutely wonderful, because not once did she say she didn't want to come. I knew that she didn't understand for the 3 first weeks at all, because she just said, we sat in this room, then we sat in that room, and then we went out. So she could just tell me what she had experienced. And then after 3 weeks, some words she could describe a bit more. So that was quite interesting. But I think it's so much to do. Of course, we can't control what other children, especially what other children say, but how not parents, but the adults in the situation, how they react and how they embrace the situation. So that's really important.
Yes. We had a bit of traumatic situation when we moved to the Netherlands from Italy, and my son was used to speak Italian, and all of a sudden he was in an environment where everyone was speaking Dutch, and we sent him to a creche just for a few hours for the week in order to socialize, and he would not understand anything. He was 2.5 years old, and the Leidsters, the teachers, were not trained at all for this. And when I told them also, please, can you make him understand with gestures, with pictures, etc. But they couldn't be bothered. So after 2 weeks, that were very, very hard, I took him out there and we found another one. But I know that it was very, very difficult for him. And 2 years later, he started British school in English. And for that, we prepared him a bit better. Well, we couldn't prepare him for the Dutch one because we moved very at short notice. But for the English, we could prepare him by introducing him to the language beforehand. And he was verbal already, so he could make himself understood in already then Dutch at that time and German and the other languages. But I think it comes down to preparing the children and being prepared as a parent, that not all teachers know how to handle these situations.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So the frustration part does definitely exist in that case. And thank you so much also for sharing your personal stories here. I think this is going to help a lot of parents or those who want to be parents one day, and getting advice from you. I have
also, if I could say, I agree with Ute. If you can prepare, it definitely helps, because I did with my kids. I knew in December of last year that we were coming here. And so I started speaking French to them 2 days a week, and just knowing that they at least know their body parts, colors, numbers, they could do some basics. I wasn't worried about sending them to school because they at least know some, and we would just, everyday conversation. How are you? This is clean. This is, give me this. I think if you're able to, if you know in advance, like Ute said, it's not always possible. And just, even if you don't know any of the language, you could still do some basics, you yourself, and then help your student, your child, not your student, and say, like, we're going to learn together. Let's learn to count in Chinese. Just, that you're going through it together. It doesn't matter if you know or you don't know. I think, as a family, if you're going through a change where you're moving to a different country, there's definitely going to be some obstacles.
Absolutely. And what you can do as a parent as well to create, because like Wood said, not all teachers understand and know how to support these children. So you can create, for example, some cards where there's, let's say there's a loo, there is water, there is things that your child might want to, which are really important to communicate, or mealtime, and then introduce this to your child's teacher and say, well, please, if my child doesn't understand them, please use these. My child knows what these pictures mean. So there are ways of overcoming such things.
Yeah, I did that, but they did not use them. The cards were still in the locker, so we never know what they do with what you suggest.
Yeah, true.
It's good to get informed beforehand. What are they actually happy to do?
Okay, so that means that it does not only depend on the parents, but also obviously on the people that are somehow in contact with your children. And by preparing them for a new language, it's also like talking to them, explaining them, but also practicing the language, well, maybe also with them, together with them. Tetsu, I wanted to know, because I have met your child, and you know how much I like them. So I was just wondering, how do you handle this? How do you motivate your child? Well, the four of them, how do you motivate them whenever they lose interest in a language?
Well, here's the first premise, is that fortunately, knock on wood, my oldest is now 9, and I've not had a case of refusal. Whether they're actively interested in speaking is a different case. For example, Mandarin, of our languages, English, French, Japanese, Mandarin, and Spanish, of these 5 languages, I think Mandarin is one of their weakest, both because the amount of exposure, and last year and the year before we couldn't go to Taiwan. So the amount of exposure and the difficulty of the language probably made it that it's, I think, the weakest in the 5. They're all pretty good, but if I had to rank them, I think it's the weakest. And they're not so interested in always, speaking Mandarin other than with me. But what we do is this is not a plug, or it's not, I'm not getting paid for this, but I use italki with our kids, and it's been magical since last year. We've been using italki, and we've got teachers, and we work with the teachers to really get them to prepare material that are interesting to the kids. My two oldest are using italki daily, like literally daily. And I'll tell you how much they love this. It's not like we're not forcing them, we're not bribing them. I'll tell you how much they love it. They love it so much that they're getting up at 5:45 in the morning before going to school to take the lesson, and they're fighting each other to say, it's my turn today. No, you did it yesterday. They're doing that to do about half an hour, 45 minutes of italki before going to school every day. So
good teacher.
That's how. Yeah.
That's what we need more of.
Well, definitely. You got to go through a few teachers to find the right fit, but you also need to work with the teacher to produce, to give them the good material.
Hey, can you have that teacher give a talk next year on how they're teaching kids? Because that could be.
Should I give the identity of the secret teacher?
Well, no, just ask them first. Maybe
No,
next year.
Again, he's a great teacher, and italki has many great teachers, and having a great teacher is only part of the equation. Is that you have to work with the teacher to really give them the right material that fits your kid. Like my oldest and my second, they have different interests, so the program itself has to also fit, and they have different personalities. My oldest, he's like he's a super extrovert, and he doesn't mind. When he's doing his lessons, he's like screaming on the top of his lungs. But my daughter, she's a little more shy, though. We have to put her in a separate room, for example. You have to really custom make this. You have to be very observant of your child and what he or she likes, and build that program with your teacher. And we don't, we get the teacher to do some grammar, reading, and whatnot, but we also tell them, spend some time, play Roblox or Minecraft with your child. That's also fine, Yes. It's that discussion, it's that fun time that really gets them back day after day. So that's how we motivate them with what they like, their interests. We need to find out what they like, and then capitalize on that.
So true. Yeah. My son was against speaking French when I first tried to introduce it, and he would just say, "Nya, nya, nya." He would say, no, he didn't want it. And so I just backed off, and then we just listened to music kind of passively, and then I would like sing songs, and my daughter likes to sing and dance, and they eventually got into it, and then they knew, and I would explain what the song was about, and I would kind of translate and say things. But it took a little bit, and I when I went back to doing more French with them in December, he was okay with it. But when I had tried in the summer, he was like, "Nya, nya, 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 I don't understand you, just speak Polish." And even now when I'm doing my schoolwork, and if I'm speaking in French or reading something to myself, and he's like, say it in Polish, Mom, why are you speaking like that? They're so funny. They do know, like they hear me if I'm in a different talk, and I was speaking Spanish the other day, and they were like, why is she speaking Spanish? I want to speak Spanish. And I was like, oh, this is great. Like they're funny. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
That's 4 years old. It's yeah.
I want to ask, so now that we are already talking about this, how can you motivate your kid to, keep up with the language? We've talked about the social part in school, even in kindergarten. Is there any other reason why a kid might refuse to use the language, or lose interest in learning that language from your experience? The social factor was already one.
Yes, yeah. I think if there is not the need that was before, that's the first one. If there is any shift, for example, when they start going to daycare or to school in an additional language, and they maybe are less interested, or say, well, I use for 80% of the day, I use the other language, and I'm tired when I come home. I don't want to switch back to the home language. And they have they're processing the whole day in the school or the community language or whatever language it is that they are exposed to. And I think it's then also, it's coupled with the lack of confidence all of a sudden, because if you think of them being exposed to this other language, they have this input of new words, of new sentences, of new topics. That is amazing. And then they come home and maybe mom is just asking, yeah, what do you want for dinner? Or how was your day? Etc. And then it's just we call it also the kitchen language, right? It's not only kitchen or the home language, which is very reduced, let's say, compared to what they are exposed to outside of the home. So I think it's also that loss of confidence in finding the right words and not being able to really form a full sentence in the home language. I remember that I had exactly the same. Every time I came home from school and I needed like an hour to be in the right mindset to then share what I have done at school or in other languages. So I needed a adaptation time to the other language again.
I would absolutely agree with that. That's what my younger daughter told me off for doing later, not at the point, but that she was once she had gone to school in English and she knew everything in English. And of course, everything, we have to remember that everything happened in English, all the vocabulary, all the phrases, all the what somebody said, that's all in English. So if you then insist on them using the home language, when they explain that which has completely happened in a different language, that's a big ask, especially just when they've come home. So my recommendation is always, yes, stick to your language, but listen to them when they have something to tell you, independent of the language. Don't interrupt, don't tell them to switch language. What you can do is then, let's say before you go to bed, pick up that again. Okay, you told me this, say, and then you use the words that your child would need to be able to tell you. Is that, you told me this when you came from who? So what happened then, and why did he say this and that? So you can introduce then the vocabulary, the phrases, the terms in your language to your child.
That's such a good point, because they're already tired, and it is a big translation task to have to say like everything that happened in this one language and translate it for mom and dad. That's a huge task. So I think that's a really good point.
Okay. Yeah, we've already received a lot of questions through the chat here. So thank you so much for that. I just want to make sure also that we answer some of the questions here, and then we go back to some other parts. Okay, so one of the questions here is, can you suggest books, cartoons, or other material that you might use with your children, as well as books where someone can get more info about upbringing like this? So question for all. Maybe you can also, if you have any books that you would like to recommend, maybe you can also write them here in the chat so that they can also read it.
So I think we mentioned too, Rita and I, before. It's my toolbox for multilingual families with a lot of ideas for parents to see how to foster the speaking, understanding, speaking, reading, and writing. Then we have this guide for parents from the Peach project, right? So how to raise a bilingual child, which has been translated into several other languages apart from English. And we have on the website of bilingual family singular.eu also a lot of resources where one can go and find free resources actually. So that's a way to go, I think.
Yes.
But there are so many books, and again, when it comes to books, cartoons, etc., when I see these questions, I think about my children. They have so many different interests, and my son is a fan of cartoons, and he was drawing them when he was very young. So I think follow the lead of your child. If they are interested in Thomas the Train, you buy everything that has wheels that talks about trains. And if they are interested in insects, you get everything that has insects in them. So it's a bit like Tetsu said, you just follow what they are interested, and then you will see like they are passionate about doing anything about that. So that would be my answer for this question to to this question.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've added the link to the free guide, which is a free guide. It's a proper book. It's not just a small leaflet. It's a full free book by bringing how to raise a bilingual child from the Peach Project. So I put the link to that. My own book is called Bringing Up a Bilingual Child. In there, I've also written about things that happened in our family. Amongst others, how a kitten helped me switch language when it was really difficult. So that, yeah, those are the resources on the bilingualfamily.eu website are currently we have free resources in 23 languages, I think, but those we will be adding more. Currently it's restricted to EU languages, but in the coming months and years there will be more languages added.
Thank you so much. I think this is very helpful. Tetsu also mentioned italki classes, so I guess, well, classes in general. And then anything else you would like to add to that question? Any kinds of books or material that you use?
I just put Adam Beck's website into the chat. He's got a few books. So I don't know if they mean books for the parent to prepare or books for your child. So like Ute said, just follow your child. And then if you're a new parent, you know, there's plenty of experts like we have on the panel, and also Adam Beck, who's just released a new book where I think he traveled around the world and spoke with different families and put his different interviews in. Are any of you featured in that book? I see with the shaking.
Yes.
Awesome.
My family, so, number 22. There are 26 families, I think. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I got to get my hands on that book. But he's got plenty of materials and a website and a forum, and yeah, it's a great place to go.
I've also added my website, which got about 450 articles and Q&As all about the topics of raising bilingual children, and of course I've got the Facebook group with more than 10,000 people in it at the moment, which is it's really good to have peer support, because this journey is not always easy, and at times you might start doubting yourself, am I doing this the right thing? And then it's so good to put a comment out there, and you will hear from parents who have been there, done that, and confirm, yes, we had that. My child refused to and didn't answer to me for this many years, and then this happened, and then we did this. And so look for peer support, because that is so important.
Yeah, I agree so much. There's also lots of people on Instagram. So the Facebook is nice because you're all in a group and you'll see the different questions that come up in comments. But also, if you're on Instagram instead of Facebook, there's plenty of people out there. If you just look for multilingual, bilingual, you know, things like that, you can find. And then you'll find one and you'll find the others, because we're all attached. So.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I put in a link for Yoshito, our good friend Yoshito.
Yes.
He's more focused on the literacy part. So he's got lots of exercises for kids to learn to read. So for those who are more inclined to the reading, writing part, Yoshito's a great resource.
Yeah, he's Japanese, French, and his wife is Korean, so they've got the Japanese and Korean plus English. They're living in the UK, so English, French, and he's a Spanish teacher as well. So,
yeah. Okay. Okay, we do have a lot of questions here, actually. So it's also great that you mentioned where people can find you. So if they have more specific questions, they can contact you directly. We also had a couple of questions about how to start, where to start, especially if the family does not speak different languages. In your cases right now, you all had partners who speak different languages, or you speak different languages. Two questions here. So the first one would be, how is that different, or what is your experience with the language? And I think Heather mentioned that in the beginning, also language that she back then didn't speak, Polish, right? Is that correct? how do you handle that if your kid learns a language that you or your partner does not know?
Mhm.
And how do you then, well, no, let's start with that question.
Well, luckily, I already spoke Polish before we had children. It's just not fluent. I don't consider myself to be fluent. But right now, my kids are learning French, and my husband is relearning French, but he has like a beginner level. So yeah, it can be tricky because I'm a French teacher, and if he says something wrong and I correct him, and then I'm talking about my husband right now. Like he could be offended.
Your husband or your son?
Yes, my husband. Like if you correct them, and this goes for children as well, you don't want to overcorrect because then they're like, oh, I don't want to speak this language. Oh, you're making me. And people have different levels of comfort. I prefer to be corrected because I was speaking Polish wrong for a year before he told me I was using the wrong case. And I was like, now it's ingrained. You let me say that for a year? So I'm like, tell me right away. Whereas if I tell him right away, he gets offended. So I think this is, knowing your kid, knowing your husband, spouse, how much, because it's someone who's learning. It's a very personal process. It's very, I don't know how to, it can be very tricky. And, he needs French because we're living here. And all the business, the government stuff, he's asked to get our licenses and that sort of stuff. It's just he needs French, but he doesn't do it, and it can be very tricky. But I think it's good because the kids are also learning, so we're all kind of talking about what words we're picking up. And I know there was a question Heidi asked about if you don't speak the school language. So if other panelists have, I don't have experience with that.
Yeah, when we moved to the Netherlands, I understood a bit of Dutch, but I wasn't fluent in it at all, and my husband either. So, and my son was the first one who was really immersed into it in this crash that I mentioned before. But I took it actually as something that I needed to do and I wanted to do to learn it as quickly as possible. So in the second crash then, when I found also teachers that were more collaborating with me, I always asked them what they were doing during the day and what kind of songs they were singing, what kind of stories they were telling them. And so when I biked home with my son in the back seat and he was singing, I was trying to figure out what is this song and look it up and then try to memorize the words and understand the words. And sometimes it took a long time until I really understood what was said. But let's say I really took it as something very important to understand the language that my child is schooled in, or that the community language. Because even if it's only the basics, I want to be able to, say things like I need help, or I need an ambulance, or whatever, up to how is your day, and having just small talk conversations and then increase them. Because it's, for me, also a message that I send to my child. The language that you are exposed in is something that I'm interested in. It's something important for you because you need to function in it. So I want to function in it as well. So that's my thing. But I know that not every parent can do that. And it's up to every family.
Very interesting. But does it work then? I mean, that means in your case, Heather, your partner is currently learning French. Ute, you said that you also would always try to learn the language. But is that necessarily, what if the partner doesn't want to learn the language?
Yeah, he doesn't need it. I mean, he just knows parlez-vous anglais, and then people usually say yes because Canada's bilingual. But I think just like Ute was saying, if you show the interest, I think that's, also it just validates this experience they're having. But I think depending on the age of your kid, you could also let them teach you. Like if you really don't know, you'd be like, well, tell me, what did you, what kind of words did you learn? Maybe pronounce it wrong if you're kind of like a Tetsu and a funny dad and you want to make your kid laugh. I can just picture Tetsu doing that, like, purposefully pronouncing it wrong. So your kid has to correct you and, just kind of like playing with it. I think playing with languages is so fun. My kids are little, but they play with their languages so much already. And I would love to hear other people's experiences on that, because I think it's just it can be funny, even just the way that a word is pronounced. Like my kids, we were listening to a podcast in Polish this morning, and she said apropos, which is a French word, but they use it in Polish. And my daughter was like, apropos, apropos. She just thought it was like the funniest sounding, because it's not really a Polish word. And they just, I don't know, they just find things hilarious. Toddlers at least find things hilarious. I don't know if they're going to get more edgy as they get older.
Interesting. Tetsu, what's your experience with that?
I spend a lot of time with my kids, like playing with them. I see a comment in the chat from Itai, play is key, and I really believe that. Playing with your kid and really getting down to their level and being able to speak their vocabulary and play the things that they find interesting and fun, and being able to share and bond and build trust. I think that's the key word. When you have a good trusting relationship with your kids, they will open up. They will do what you want them to do. And I think you have less risk of refusal to speak your language if you have that trusting relationship with your kid. So definitely playing not only, from a linguistic perspective, but really all sorts of parenting. From a parenting perspective, it's very, very important to be able to share and build that trust.
Yeah, you mentioned a really important point there, Tetsu, in having the trust, because that is when you have the trust and the openness, you can discuss about things. So if you notice that your child is reluctant to use a language, then you can speak about, and you can do this with much smaller children than what you would imagine. You can do it very early, just use simple terms and say, so why don't you think it's fun when we speak mom's language? Or why would you rather do? And you might be surprised by the answers. So, but it's so important to listen to the child and hear what they're saying, and then adjust accordingly. And like Tetsu says, if you have that open, close relationship, then these discussions are possible. And you won't have the situation of a refusal or kind of a strop when they're teenagers. So
some may think that it's too early, but with my oldest and my second, I'm going to start pretty soon. 8, 9 years old, the kids start to have very complex reasosoning. They're able to discuss on a very good level. And so what I do is I take time every other week. I schedule a time to do like a one-on-one discussion with my child, and that's where I talk about all these things. Sometimes I don't scold them on the spot, but I'll sort of keep that later and have a calm discussion, openness, and also share my vulnerability. Sometimes I make mistakes. I would let them know that that other time I made a mistake, I'm sorry, that kind of thing, to really share frank and honest discussions with your child from this age. I mean, I do this with my team and subordinates at my company, but I also do it with my child.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there, Tetsu, that you consider your children or your family like a team. So you know exactly what they are interested in, what their weaknesses, what their skills are, and so you can support them in every single stage that they are. I would like to share something, because we are talking about multilingual children, right? And we haven't touched this topic yet, which is one of my favorite ones, is code mixing. So when my children share whatever there is, we code mix. We mix the different languages because you want the communication to flow. And of course, at some point, maybe just that word or that sentence or that term just doesn't pop up in the mind in the moment, but it comes in another language. And this is actually what I personally really enjoy, when they then mix the different languages, and in the end, it's like a salad of different colors. And I say, well, if someone else would enter the room, they would not understand what we are saying. It's practically our chameleon side of using them all in our very, very own way. It's our family language somehow. And I like very much, like Tetsu said, I really enjoy the discussions and the conversations that we have about everything. And very often it happens, my children are schooled in English, and I have also studied in English. But of course, if they come with details about chemistry or biology or physics, something, and they have, huge conversations about that. And I said, what was this again? What is this in German? What is this in Italian? How can I understand it? So they are teaching me. And I like this. I like this very much, that I can learn from them, because it's somehow, yeah, we're learning the whole life, I think. But I like this kind of conversation with them.
Interesting. Does everyone here from our panel, do you all agree on that? So whenever languages are mixed up, that this should not be corrected, on the contrary, it helps the flow, or?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
We have so much fun mixing. Yeah, I think they know with whom they can do that, and they know with whom they can't, because trial and error, you know, my kids will try throwing a Polish word in with my parents and they don't know. And my mom will say, what did you just say? So, you know, even if I feel like they know when they can get away with it, and they know when they can't, and they learn pretty quickly. And I think it's not that we encourage it. We're not, you know, trying to create this, you know, new language of mix of all of our languages, but I think it just happens, and it can sometimes just be fun and funny. So.
Okay, interesting. Well, before we go now to this very last part, where I would like to ask each of you to give a last recommendation, I just wanted to say again, there is a lot of questions that we haven't answered. Like, I think we could talk about this an entire day, 12 hours, 24 hours. But there's a lot of people interested in that topic. And we have also someone here asking about getting started, or different techniques, things that maybe for you as panelists might be very obvious, but for people who have no experience with that, maybe not. So what we will do, so this video here is recorded, and Richard will upload this to the theater. Then you can also watch it again, and you can leave your comments. And you as panelists, I would also recommend you to maybe check the comments, and you can reply there directly as well. Okay. Yeah, and so sorry to everyone who has sent us a question that we couldn't answer during the 60 minutes that we had here. But I really want to give our 4 panelists also the opportunity to leave this panel discussion with a very last encouraging, or with a last statement from each of you. So yeah, Ute, would you like to start maybe with the last statement from your side?
On my side, maybe just with what I just said, enjoy your languages. I like to enjoy the languages, and not to take it as a burden or something that you need to achieve certain levels of competence. That comes at some point, it falls into place. And if our children need it, it will happen. And if we are the good role models, and we do not separate the languages and say this is less important than the other one, they will get there. So enjoy the languages, it's my thing. Thank you very much for inviting me to the panel.
Thank you, Ute. Heather, I see you next on my screen. Would you like to continue?
I would say for anyone that maybe wants to start, to just start, even if it's only an hour a day where you're, you know, speaking or singing, or even just passively listening to that language. I think, you know, petit à petit l'oiseau fait son nid. So like little by little, you know, step by step, I think you can get there. You don't have to have this perfect idealized bilingual parent that you're going to be, where you speak 24/7 in that language. I think, you know, that's a great end goal maybe, but none of us do that. I don't speak 24/7 in our home language. And I think what you know, like we're just saying, if you enjoy it, if you need it, if you create the need for it, I think that's really where, you know, the magic happens. I think some of us are perfectionists, myself included, so we want to do it right, and then we don't do it at all if we don't think we can do it right. You know, if I let myself be afraid because I'm not a native Polish speaker, that maybe I'm using the wrong case at some point, you know, my kids wouldn't have spoken Polish because my husband was working all day and I was home with them. So I just said, you know, this is important. This is their heritage. You know, even if maybe I make a few mistakes, they do have a native father. They do have all these native friends that speak with them. You know, we have a community that speaks with them. So I'm only one person. It's okay. You know, it's kind of that balance where I'm only one person, but yet I'm the one that's with them all the time. So I'm giving them input, and it doesn't have to be perfect. So I think, you know, and it doesn't have to be 24/7. It can be just little chunks until you feel more comfortable. If you start with a few, you know, half an hour, and then you build up to an hour, and just knowing, you know, that we're out here, there's a community, we're willing to talk with you and hear about your struggles and help you, and just, yeah, I would say do it. Start. You know, if it feels comfortable, you don't have to do more than what feels comfortable. And listen to your kids, of course. Listen, that's the most important, is if your kids don't want to, you don't push it.
Great. Rita, what is your very last statement? What would you like to share
I
with
would like to tell parents that you can do it. You can do it. Work together with your child, trust your instinct, and look at different options, try something. If it doesn't work, change the strategy. There are, if you go, for example, to my website, you'll find different strategies and you can pick one and see if that works in your family. If it doesn't, change it. If you move from where you're living, change the strategy. It's not something that you have to choose and then you have to kind of religiously stick to it. They are not at all like that. There are many different ways to achieve it, and all children are different, parents are different, so find a way that works in your family and trust your own instinct, because I know you can do it.
Thank you. Tetsu, last but not least.
Well, that's it. They've said everything. I have nothing else to say. I will, you know, but definitely I agree with all the panelists, and I think I can sum it up in one word that I like a lot, and it's in the saying, success is a habit. So we're not in it for a sprint. You're not going into, you know, a boot camp for 2 weeks and suddenly they all speak, you know, different languages. That's not the case. It is definitely a marathon over many, many years, and you need a strategy that allows you to do it day in and day out. And you're the only one who really know what your capacities are, what your, you know, circumstances are, and you need to make that strategy that you can do it, churn it every day and make it happen. So you need to build that habit, and I'll close with that. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much. And I would also like to ask Richard here, because obviously Richard, we all know that he's also a father. He has, I mean, he's a very inspiring polyglot, but also as a father, Richard, not as a, so you change your hat now, not as a conference organizer, as a father, is there anything that you would like to say to end this beautiful and inspiring panel discussion?
I think a lot of it's been said, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I've got a teenager now, so what I'll say is that every age brings its own challenges when it's when you're talking about language acquisition in children. What they learn when they're toddlers, what they learn when they're starting school, what they learn when they go to high school, and they're focusing on their final exams, and what they're going to do at university when thoughts turn to those things, and friends become more important. There are an awful lot of things to take on board, and for sure, it's not an easy road. There are definitely good strategies, and I think you've already had a lot of great resources shared with you already that you can follow upon. And I would definitely encourage you to do that. Reach out to people who have been through the experience, and their experiences, just be aware, exactly as was said, some strategies may work for one family and not for another. It all depends not just on the child and the languages, it depends on your situation, where you live, it depends on the languages spoken at home. There are so many factors that come into the mix. And then also, your child has a personality, and so do you as a parent. So there are many, many things that go on under the water, really, when we talk about this topic. And this is why I think services like you know, we've talked about today, where you go into a family and you actually give advice based on an individual family's situation. And I know I've had people ask me for advice before now as well. I've got a family that constantly reaches out to me. They used to live here because they have trilingual children, and they every stage of their journey, when they've moved countries, they've been in touch and reached out. Oh, say, what should we do now for their languages at school? What should we do now at home? And we have a long discussion, we talk through it. And I think that's the way to go, is to reach out to other human beings. We're there to help, right?
Well, and this is also what this beautiful polyglot community is for. So Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, for participating. And yeah, feel free to ask our panelists questions through the Saturn Theatre once the video is there. Thank you very much, everyone, and
Thank
enjoy.
you, Anya.
Thank
Herzlichen
you.
Dank.
Thank you. Kiitos.
Grazie.
Tack så
Merci,
mycket.
dziękuję.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you to the panelists.
Thank you.